Welcome to the New Economy. What's next? My guest today is Miss Abimbola Dames, and she's from a business called Shador, and it's about to be an exciting interview, so stay tuned. So we were talking off air, Miss Abimbola. How did you tell us what you do at Shador?
So at Shador, I co-founded it about 10 years ago with my husband, Wilshire Dames, and our business partner, Theodore Cooper. I'm responsible for the overall marketing of the company. And what we do is we sell couture costumes and the raw materials needed to create custom costumes.
Okay. So marketing, costumes. So there's a little bit of manufacturing going on in there. What led you guys down to do this business?
So to do Shador, so my husband, he is a carnival costume designer, but that he was actually a Junkanoo builder. Well, he's still. And when we moved to Miami, I really wanted us to supplement our income, and it was one way of doing it. So that kind of spurred that, in addition to there just really being a market need for it, and working with other costume designers and bands in Miami.
So you primarily produce stuff for the Miami Carnival? Is that what it is?
So not anymore. In the past, we did produce costumes for Miami, but it did grow where we would be able to provide costumes globally. We've sent costumes to Europe and Trinidad and anywhere that there's a carnival.
That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
So in terms of your marketing, I imagine then it's mostly digital or marketing.
So it is primarily digital marketing. I initially focused heavily on social media, and that really got the word out about Shador, and we were able to target our primary audience. And between social media and creating a website that would allow us to garner an email subscription list, we were really able to beef up the email marketing aspect. And that has been really helpful, especially during this time for the pandemic. We've had to pivot with carnivals not taking place. The email subscription list has been really helpful in terms of just buying the products to start creating the costumes for that day somewhere in the future where they'll be able to.
Somewhere soon.
Somewhere soon, fingers crossed.
It's email marketing for my viewers at home is, sometimes you go on a website and they say, hey, why don't you subscribe to our list or join this list? Sometimes it's even a paid list. And the great thing about the email is once you have the email, you can continually market to the same people, And that
community building is just so important when it comes to your brand and creating that word of mouth as well.
It's like I imagine you've seen it's actually quite interesting to build these funnels and lists and stuff like that. Why don't you talk to our guests a little bit about the process of getting into that marketing, and there's a learning curve because it's not, you don't just suddenly know how to do this.
That's very true. There is a learning curve. I would say that if you are creative, that learning curve is something that you're able to easily get over. I have a background in science. There's is in psychology, but I had an interest in consumer psychology. And from there, I was able to start finding my own resources to help with my own learning and development. So resources like HubSpot, where you're able to learn quite a bit about marketing and funnels and how to position, promote, and price a product or service. And you can really take learning into your own hands from that standpoint. And obviously, when you're providing marketing at any level for your business or even for your personal brand, it allows you to learn along the way, and your experiences really help as well, especially for any lessons learned, any hard you might need to learn along the way.
Do you have any like gurus and stuff that you follow, like for email tips, copywriting tips?
Or I do follow Neil Patel. I
Okay.
like Neil Patel when it comes to search engine optimization and search.
For you're throwing out, so you're starting to get technical. So search engine optimization is
Yes,
where you set up your website in such a way so that you appear higher up on Google.
correct. So that's a great way to break it down.
Mm-hmm.
It's commonly referred to as SEO. And
Mm-hmm.
I find that Neil has usually the most updated tips on how to remain on that top result. And even when the company is not necessarily yours, but you may be an expert. For instance, I have another company that I pivoted. It's called Bold Insider Marketing. And I initially used that platform to provide digital marketing services for clients. And then when work got really tough for me in terms of bandwidth at the company where I work, I really wanted to shut it down, but I actually changed the whole landscape of it. And I started providing a service where I would provide sermon notes for different churches. And
Oh, that's interesting. So like,
so,
that's an interesting niche. I could
right?
imagine, so I imagine that those were the notes. Was it primarily to the pastors, or was it to the congregations? How does that?
It's to the congregation or to
Okay.
so most of my notes are for Transformation Church, so TC
Mm-hmm.
Michigan. When I look
Okay.
at my analytics using Google Analytics, the majority of the audience is coming from the US, and then you have
Mm-hmm.
a lot coming from Europe and Africa as well.
That's quite incredible. Just the global the global nature of it, right?
Right.
That as a pastor or whatever, or someone involved in the church, you can reach out to an audience that's beyond your borders. It's quite
Right. And it's
incredible.
doing something that I was doing anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I would normally have notes in my journal, but now I'm able to benefit from it from a revenue standpoint, just from the ads alone. So I'm not necessarily selling anything outside of a few pieces of merchandise, but all of that is also using drop shipping, and
Mm-hmm.
simply where you use a merchandiser where you're able to create a product and or design it digitally, and then they're able to print it out and ship it for you and
Great.
use
Great.
that. And it really just runs itself outside of me just putting the notes in there. And then now I have volunteers that also write notes. So it really
Yeah.
helps, and I'm happy I
Yeah.
didn't shut it down.
Yeah. That's a pretty interesting niche. Like, it's I constantly tell the viewers on the guest that business is just about finding a problem and finding a way to add value, and
Absolutely.
of course getting paid for it. But so you find a problem. The problem was, I imagine, that the pastor was not technically savvy enough to do this, and now you've come in and you've set up this process, and now he's able to expand his reach, which is
Right.
something that's very important to his organization.
Absolutely.
So it's wonderful thing. So we're going to take a quick commercial break, and then when we come back, we're going to dive into a little bit more about who you are and a little bit about your journey into starting your business. So stay tuned.
Hi, I'm D.R.C. Ramming, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Arawak X. Arawak X is a fully regulated securities exchange in the Bahamas. We are the financial gateway to the Caribbean. We match investors with startups and high-growth companies over the internet. Come talk to us at Arawak X to learn more about our diverse portfolio.
We're back with Miss Abimbola Dames, and I got it right this time, right?
Yes.
Okay. At first you were looking at me like, it's like, oh, and I'm like, oh, I got to do better. Because my name is DRC, but everybody says Darcy, so I have to bite my tongue half the time anyway. So so I hate doing that to people. But anyway, who are you, and like, how did you end up coming to this and coming to this business, and yeah, so tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm a Bahamian. I grew up in the Bahamas, in Nassau, and then Freeport. In terms of getting into marketing in general, even just entrepreneurship, it really started at a young age. Both of my parents have been entrepreneurs. My dad more than my mom. But my mom, when I lived in Nassau, for example, I went to QC and she would have me take baskets for Valentine's Day and Mother's Day, and I would sell them. So I was always accustomed to selling stuff and just to supplement income. And then my
explains the consumer psychology.
right? And then my daddy, he sold luxury cabinets when I lived in Nassau, and then he even sold diapers at one point, just always trying to fill a market need. And now he sells tiles. He owns Tile Magic on Farrington Road. So I've always been around that. And that's why I also feel like representation is so important, because if you are around somebody that's making money from doing their own thing, then you realize that it's not as hard as it may seem.
Now, I wouldn't necessarily say that, but it's certainly different skills.
Right.
Different skills. Like when you work for someone, you kind of have to gear yourself around what your boss wants. When you run your own business, you kind of have to figure out what the customer wants. And the really good companies get their whole staff to gather around what the customer wants. It is a beautiful thing growing up in a business family. I grew up in a business family too. So, you're sitting there figuring things out, trying to add value. Why don't you talk a little bit, because you're 10 years into your business now, but talk about starting it and, starting it and, the process of figuring it out.
Okay, well, I would say figuring it out had a lot to do with my current role, what I'm in. I currently serve as a product marketing manager for a company here in Texas, but it's also all over the place. I've worked here in Miami and in Virginia as well. And a lot of what I learned happened there. And I was able to leverage quite a bit of knowledge from my experiences there, as well as my experiences working in the Bahamas. So for example, at Freeport Container Port, I had a lot of technical experience, and I worked at the Weight Loss Institute of the Bahamas, where I gained marketing experience. And all of these experience coupled together, they gave me the foundation that I needed in order to help drive sales and success in Shadora when we were starting.
So, but talk a little bit about the, there's that moment in time where you say to yourself, oh my God, I'm gonna have to jump out onto this new path. Talk a little bit about that experience, because every entrepreneur has a different story for why they decided to become a crazy person and try to do business. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, I feel as though my introduction in terms of Shadora is a little different from that standpoint, as I was a co-founder. So having that team gives you quite a bit to lean on, but let's say more recently with starting businesses. So for instance, last year, I started a nonprofit for children to help promote literacy. I would say the thought process for that is just really being able to identify a problem and then just garnishing the courage to be the person to solve that problem, to just convince yourself that you're capable of solving that problem, and then just diving head in.
Yeah, because that's a good way of putting it, because it is diving head into a pool with no water.
Right.
So because it gives you a bunch of licks for it's fascinating. I mean, like, but it is a journey. It is a journey. You learn some stuff, you take some stuff from your working life, you take some stuff from your adult life, but it is a journey.
Yes, I was saying that our businesses, they take on many faces as we're on the journey to maturity with the business. And what your business looks like in the initial phase is so different than what it would look like as you mature and go through that life cycle. And one thing that I noticed that really helps is to even be able to just incorporate simple project management into your business. So that was a hard lesson that we learned in Shadora early on with some of our clients. So when you think about time, scope, and price, when any of those factors change, they influence the other. And in the beginning, we didn't do a really good job of explaining to clients that, hey, if you change the scope of this project, then it's going to take longer or it's going to cost more in order for us to complete it faster.
You're in production, you're in manufacturing, light manufacturing. So there's the sales part of it, but then there's also the manufacturing part. And you were talking about properly project managing it and how when one of the factors changes, the scope, the price, what was the third one?
The time.
When one of those changes, it materially affects the other two, and learning how to do that. How does that relate? What were the pains that you probably had to go through to learn that?
So we have a folder of what we call lessons learned, where we just have some hard lessons, and that's partially due to this same element of project management. So with the training portion or the training component, while our team may have been trained on this element, the time, scope, and price, we didn't have it within our operating procedures to ensure that we were also training our clients when we onboarded them. Since we had a campaign where we were creating costumes for Grenada, and they just kept changing the scope of the project. Okay, we don't want it yellow. Okay, we don't want it pink. Okay, we don't want it blue anymore. Let's add feathers. No, this type of feathers. And when it comes to production, you're buying things internationally, so it can take up to 3 months sometimes to even get your raw materials.
And in COVID, it's even worse, right?
And it's even worse with COVID. So things like that, we had to learn and put it within our actual contracts, this methodology and simple project management, that things like the scope can't change unless the client would be willing to pay more, because it's going to either cost more or it's going to take longer. And often there were many time constraints associated with Carnival based on the dates of Carnival.
Well, well, the good thing is that the Carnival, these figuring out all these little details to make it work. But the good thing about doing this is that Carnival has such a wide, there's so many carnivals that are popping up. Basically, wherever Caribbean people live, there's a carnival. So why don't you talk a little bit? I know you briefly talked about how you're shipping them out to the Caribbean, you're shipping them out to Europe. How does that work? What is the total addressable market for this kind of business?
And so the logistics for that, it did depend on the location and the project. If something was really large, sometimes it made sense, or especially if the costumes had a lot of feathers, sometimes it made sense to prepare some things in advance and then finish the rest in that country. Other things you would physically take over, because another issue that sometimes happens is costumes get held up with customs, and different governmental bodies that can really throw a wrench into your production. So for instance, we supported a band, and one of the entire sections got held up with US Customs. And that type of experience can really put a damper on Carnival because they held the costumes until Carnival Day. So obviously that can create lots of havoc and
Tons of havoc. And,
tons of
I
havoc.
mean, because that's the whole point, right? I want to wear my costume on the day of, not the day
That's
after.
the whole point. And you're in the mix of individuals. They may just be coming from a party, so they may be drinking, et cetera, et cetera. So tensions are rising high. And that's where training comes in with operating procedures, because you also need to know crisis management, how to deal and operate within a crisis, and how to remain calm and deal with your clients and calm them down and create alternative solutions for them so that you're still able to meet their needs, whether it be providing them a different costume or providing them compensation, whatever would appease them and still allow them to have a good experience.
It's we're going to take a short commercial break, and then when we return, we're going to talk a little bit about this, getting in more into the logistics and kind of figuring things out. So stay tuned.
Arawak X opens frontier and emerging markets where you can discover innovative companies that have high growth potential. We support initiatives that promote financial inclusion and social justice through equal access to investment opportunities and capital. Come talk to us at Arawak X to learn more about our diverse portfolio.
So we're back. We're talking about producing these things, moving these things. People forget, and there's a time sensitive nature to getting all of this done because it's for an event, Carnival. What would you say is some of the hard lessons learned?
Hard lessons learned from that standpoint would be not necessarily knowing what it is that you're coming into. So if you're going to somewhere in the Caribbean, you may not realize that that particular country, they don't have the same outlets as you to plug in your glue gun. Something as simple as that.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, that's like, oh man, I wouldn't even have thought of that. I mean, that's yeah, because in Europe all the plugs are different.
Right. So these are
not
expect in the Caribbean, but you go somewhere like St. Bart's and that's the case. And
they have different plugs in St. Bart's too.
Right. So they have different plugs in different Caribbean countries. So St. Bart's. So these are some of the things that you need to do when you're researching exactly how you're going to complete this project and where you're going to complete the project, because things like that can slow you down when you arrive.
It's amazing how this it's the little things like that you would never think about until you get into the nitty-gritty of it. And for my folks at home, that's what business is about, figuring out those little tiny things to put into your operating procedures so that and that's really how you guys are building the business, is that operational procedures. Because at some point, I imagine you're not the one that's doing the operations, you're just on the sales role. So, but in a pinch, you can just open up your operational procedures and follow what's going on. I say all that to say that oftentimes people think of the role of the business is to, of course, make money, but in order to do that, you need the structure, and operational procedures is a big part of that structure.
Absolutely.
Who in the firm wrote that, or has it been a team effort?
So it is a team effort. I was responsible for most of the documentation, as that's something that I do in my other role. And knowledge management is a big thing for me, just being able to have everything in one central location and being able to disperse that accordingly so that when there are new people that join the team, they're able to quickly understand exactly step by step what your organization does, how it should be done, and reduce any opportunities for error, bad customer service, micromanagement, or miscommunication.
It's like we don't often get the chance to talk about the structure because everybody goes on that job, they see that employee manual, the operational procedures, and they say to themselves, man, I got to read all of that. No, yes, you have to read all of that. That's the point of it. It was created so that to bring you up to speed quickly. And organizational behavior, your company culture should be ingrained throughout the whole thing. So why don't you talk a little bit about your company culture being a creative light manufacturing business?
So I would say the culture within the company itself, it's very creative, but also very family oriented.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I work with my husband, but our business partner, Theo, we became like family. He's like a brother to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then individuals that work with us that started out as just people that we met that wanted to be involved in something that could be so fun just when working on these items and just trying to see how everything comes together. And it's always great to see the finished product of a costume. And those people have become just lifelong friends. People you may have thought you would have been friends with for a short time. You now look back and you've been friends for a decade.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. It's a beautiful thing, like because I imagine there was some grinding of the minds when things first started out, but when you get successful, you look back at that time and you say, we survived that.
Of course. Especially with marketing, everyone wants to provide input.
Yeah, everybody's a marketing expert, right? But it's the process of business. It starts off as an idea, and then over time, there's some more structure built, and then things. I love business. If you can't tell, I love every aspect of it, and it's a beautiful thing. Why, in this last minute, let's talk a little bit about your ideas and thoughts on expansion. And what do you see the future in this COVID world looking like?
So the future in this post-pandemic environment, I would say the future of business, I see there being less and less brick and mortar institutions and organizations, especially as we have the metaverse looming. I expect that brands will create more and more experiences that allow us to do them in a digital way. Also, from a Shador standpoint, I want to go more into the direction of the product aspect and being able to just provide the feathers, the gemstones, and the trimmings that are required for the costumes, as opposed to having
like move up the vertical.
Right.
Okay. Well, do you have any words of advice for anyone trying to start a business or thinking about starting a business?
Well, starting a business, it obviously depends on where you want to start it. So I would say, obviously find out what the requirements are to start that business, whether it be business licenses. Depending on the type of business that you're offering or the product, you may want to look into things like copyrights, trademarks, patents, that kind of thing. Obviously, it truly depends on your business model. I would, as a Christian, I would say pray about it. See where to make sure you get that okay, and so that you don't find that everything is perfect, but it's just not working out. And I would say get to know your audience, get obsessed about them, find out what it is that they want, where they live. When I say where they live, meaning the platforms that they live on. Get involved in social media, find out which platform they spend most of their time on, what their interests are, and just really hone in on what we call personas, meaning the different types of people that you're targeting, and be able to make sure that your marketing for your business will be targeting those people specifically in order to drive sales.
That was Miss Abimbola Dames from Shador, and we'll see you next time.